committee meeting for August 17th, 2026. The first committee for discussion will be public safety.
All right, good afternoon. I'd like to call the Public Safety Committee to order. We have two items on the agenda. The first is temporary stop signs on Kings Road. Mr. Williams.
Thank you. So just want to point out just the correction for the date. Apologies. I've had the opportunity to speak with the individual that resides between the stop signs, if anyone's been able to be read on this issue. Last year, the council made an adoption to put in place a temporary stop sign, one of which was to kind of address some ongoing concerns by individuals, residents within the area that have kind of been very strong about wanting to see other interventions put in place to address just excessive speeding, disruptive behavior from vehicles. In our attempt at doing this, I want to make sure we identify that it has addressed speeding. And to the extent of Mr. Collins, who is in with us today, working with the police department, has kind of put in place a nice working relationship where kind of offending vehicles have been identified and the police department has been responsive in their attempts to address those behaviors. However, I want to point out, and this is my reasoning for bringing this forward, those efforts have come at the expense of a homeowner. So the individual residing at the property between the two stop signs, I believe that there is a negative or unintended consequence from these stop signs addressing his quality of life and also potential resale value of the home. I don't know if you're aware of most vehicles nowadays have the engine shutoffs. So what's happening at every stop is the engine is cutting off and then turning back on, and that doesn't even address the fact that tractor trailers and also buses are making those same stops and starts. This individual's, bedroom is right against the wall, and him recently being in a retirement stage of his career has not been able to enjoy some of the amenities of summer open window life due to these issues. One of the points I want to highlight before allowing the council to kind of comment about the situation is definitely this is the only resident who has highlighted these concerns. However, I want to make sure that we comment not from a place of privilege, but from a place of understanding that if we were that one individual, I hope that the council's efforts would be to address just our individual concerns. So at this point, I want to also highlight that I did speak with Mr. Wallen. He did highlight that prior, there were alternate locations that these stop signs could be placed at. So those are options, but in this conversation, I want to make sure we're just being considerate on where they currently are and being responsive to the fact that they are identified as a temporary resource and not permanent.
Are there any questions or comments on this agenda item? Go ahead, Mr. Burr.
Thank you. I guess temporary, when the resolution is just to install, I don't know where temporary came from. Could you explain that to me?
Go ahead, Mr. Williams.
Yeah, so Councilman Ingert was on the council when it was passed,
Okay.
but truly it was because there was a hesitancy from our Mr. Wallen with making it temporary, making it permanent,
Right.
because the data didn't necessarily outline. This was more of the council appeasing the considerations and wanting to make sure we were being responsive to the continued frustration with lack of action from the city.
Go ahead, Ms. Fletcher.
Were there alternative locations for the stop signs, or that discussion might have happened while I was out, but
Go ahead, Mr. Williams.
There were, Mr. Wallen was very intentional with just giving us the one option. I believe there were further conversations with Mr. Collins or other individuals in the Woodlawn Neighborhood Association. I did confirm with him, he was confident that there were other locations. His assumption was, and I hate speaking for people, especially when they can't defend themselves if I'm inaccurate, but his response was he perceived this as the best location to appease that neighboring community, so addressing like two birds at once, for lack of better words.
Go ahead, Mr.
Thank you. What does the data show now as far as concerns on the road, speeding, accidents? And do you know, has Lieutenant Dalton come up with any data that might help us along?
Go ahead, please.
I'd hate to put him on the spot. I don't think he was prepared to speak to this agenda item, but I think anecdotally, it has improved. I know when I went out to visit this residence, it is noticeably different. The fact that cars more or less have to acknowledge that it exists, whether you run by it or not. So I think it is working. It's just working at the expense of residents.
Understood.
Go ahead, please.
Would we be able to obtain those alternate locations if we were to distance those stop signs away from that resident's house after talking with Woodlawn Neighborhood Association members about the effectiveness of it? And though I do want to take into consideration the importance of quality of life for that one person, I spoke to another resident who had to deal with cars speeding past, almost hitting their child and grandchildren, running into their house because they lose control on that corner. And I spoke with this person as well who's impacted by these stop signs. And it's, I hate to weigh one against the other, but the endangerment of someone's child and well-being compared to noise, for me, outweighs a little bit. So do we have those other alternative sites, or would we be able to see what those locations would be that can still impact that area in the same way or manner?
I think that's items that we can get before we make a final determination. I think the intent with this was just to initiate the conversation. I appreciate the concertedness with making sure we're balancing that, but I think with kind of loss of life, this is not a debate, but I want to make sure the council is being intentional. If we are looking at cementing this, then we should remove the temporary language and make it permanent. But if not, I think we should consider other locations. So,
Go ahead, please.
Councilman Inger, I would say if there are no other questions, I can reach out to Mr. Wallen to get those alternative locations. But I would definitely like to see this back on the agenda in 2 weeks.
Are there any other questions or comments? Seeing none. The next item on the agenda is discussion e-bikes and motorized scooters, safety, compliance, and enforcement. Mr. Williams.
Should we turn off the...
It's good for you.
So I'd say with this discussion that Lieutenant Dalton is here to speak on, I think the matters of e-bikes and motorized scooters throughout our city, this sincerely is not an issue unique to Schenectady, but I think as these resources are becoming more affordable, becoming more accessible, I myself have just noticed just the frequency of individuals using these recreationally. And that is not to attribute all of the challenges the police department is kind of experiencing, and also other drivers with individuals kind of improperly using these. But it's just to highlight that there needs to be an acknowledgement of the current stipulations within our guidelines of the police department enforcing these, the challenges associated with inappropriate usage, and then also coupling that with, do we need to identify a space within the city so that these, if used for kind of joy or pleasure outside of traveling perspectives, is afforded. And I think just putting it concisely, education, enforcement, and appropriate use locations is necessary. I think to take any one out of order, I think is essentially looking at this through a very confined lens, which isn't appropriate to the fact that these are used to get people from point A to point B. And we are living in challenging times where dollars are having to be stretched a lot further, and using this mode of transportation in comparison to a car or bus is an option for a lot of individuals. So it's definitely appeases some other quality of life concerns. But my sincerity with bringing this forward is I notice them on our sidewalks when I go to Mila's or any restaurant in downtown Schenectady. I notice individuals doing wheelies down Erie Boulevard or down State Street. And the concern is I do not want to have our council or our city be responsive once we have had loss of life. I think we need to understand what options are available to us from the police department's enforcement standpoint. Also, I want to make sure we're setting them up for success, because I think implementing other measures similar to that from our neighboring towns like Niskayuna, I think that is unenforceable from my understanding and the ride-alongs that I've been on. So I think rather than speaking to the issue, having the opportunity to hear from our law enforcement community, and I appreciate Lieutenant Dalton for being present. And I'd say if anyone wants to comment before that, they'd like to hear his just comments. And I want to make sure this is not a blame game, or this is not placing shame on any one person. This is just acknowledging we have to get ahead of this, because it is only going to get worse if we fail to address it.
Are there any questions or comments before we invite Lieutenant Dalton up? Seeing none. Lieutenant Dalton.
Good evening. Everybody has a copy?
Yes.
Okay, so what I did with this document is I took a lot of questions. I've received questions from some of you individually. I've received questions from the community, and we get a lot of complaints and questions from officers as well. Also been invited to several neighborhood association meetings where I've gotten questions about these devices. So I put some of those most common questions together here with some answers. This is just a guide. It's by no means the end-all be-all. You know, obviously when we're dealing with complicated legal matters, some things can be left up to interpretation. But I'd like to give you all a few minutes just to check out the questions and see if there's any clarification or questions that are missing that you'd like me to speak on.
Go ahead, please.
Just as we continue to read, can you just kind of give us a quick background of the recent transactions that just happened with the e-bikes in the city that people experienced? I know that I had a few residents reach out to me about it. Some of the issues were regular bikes as well were getting stops that were inside the bike lanes. Some of the officers not knowing the full area of where the bike lanes were, the new travel bike lane as well, and the connector that we just opened. Can you kind of touch on that, the importance of what you just did, or why we did it, or what was going on with this?
Sure, I have some other notes here. So basically, we're kind of where we were several years ago. We had these same conversations with dirt bikes. As dirt bikes and mopeds and motorized two-wheel vehicles became more prevalent, they became cheaper, and we started seeing them everywhere in the city. On the sidewalks, we started seeing accidents, complaints, vehicle and traffic infractions. We saw serious physical injuries. We've seen loss of life. And I think that was around 2000, 2021. And, in response to that, the city ended up enacting I believe it's code 248 in reference to off-road vehicles and dirt bikes. And basically we're starting to see the same exact pattern now, just with these new devices. There's been such an increase of available technology, and the technology's been really moving very quickly. Some of these devices are much more powerful than traditional gas-powered dirt bikes. They move very quickly, they have a lot of torque, they pick up fast, and we've seen some of them that can do 80, 90 miles an hour. So all of this pretty much led up to us trying to take some action because the number of complaints, the danger to life and public safety.
Go ahead, please.
I would say one of my questions is, I know that there are stipulations at the speed at which these devices can kind of be operable. Have you noticed just a disregard from vendors, or is there not really an acknowledgement from any of these vehicles to have those speed restrictions?
Well, I think part of the problem here is there's such a wide range of devices, and if it has two wheels and it's powered by electric motor, we kind of just call it an e-bike, but that's not really the case. The main problem, which we're seeing, is a lot of these overpowered devices that are actually not even classified as e-bikes, and they're more like ATVs or classified as off-road vehicles. Some of them meet the definition of a motor vehicle under VTL, some don't. But the speed is a big problem. For the Class 1 and Class 2 actual e-bikes, the problems that we're seeing really have to do with riding on the sidewalk, disobeying traffic control devices, riding on the wrong side of the road. They're often riding into the side of moving vehicles. They're hitting pedestrians, they're getting in crashes on curbs, and people are sustaining serious physical injury through head injuries. And I know of at least one case where somebody was paralyzed, a young man was paralyzed. So it's really a problem. We're seeing stuff across the board.
Go ahead, please.
With the class 1 and 2 motorbikes that we know that's legal to operate inside the city of Schenectady, would it be more beneficial and easier to kind of structure this to have more bike lanes inside the city that they can operate inside as we continue to build out now? Obviously, we just did one here, but down the main line, State, Albany, is where this is going to be something that people can actually begin to regularly look for as we see it continue to grow with the e-bikes. And then for Class 3 motor vehicles, which are not legal to operate inside Schenectady, would it be more mindful of us and more preventative instead of responsive to be looking at those that are selling those Class 3 bikes with the modification to go past that 25 mile per hour?
Yeah, some of the problems we're seeing is the Class 1 and 2s can be modified to become illegal. And a lot of times we're seeing that the original markings are being removed, or there's attempts to hide what the actual device is. As far as Class 3 goes, they're illegal everywhere outside of New York City. And they're a bit of a problem, but the real big problem is the ones you see without any pedals. So pretty much if you see something without a pedal, it's not a Class 1, 2, or 3. It's more like a dirt bike. I do have some recommendations of approaches we could take with local legislation in reference to some of this stuff. New York State does grant already through the VTL local municipalities the authority to regulate these items. So they sort of the state gives us a baseline, what we can operate from, and then it gives local municipalities the freedom to legislate for their needs. If you want, I can go over a couple of the recommendations.
If you could, please. I'm sorry.
Yeah, go ahead.
If you could, please.
Go ahead, please.
All right, so basically the current legislation, it defines off-road vehicle and dirt bikes. As I said, some of these devices fit in that category squarely. Some of them, it's a question that is left up to interpretation of the court on a case-by-case basis, because the origin and capabilities of every bike can be so different. So some of the suggestions I came up with, just adding to the city code to specifically include some of these things, so we have specific direction. So, police and public safety will know what to do with certain devices in certain situations, and the public can also know what's expected and legal. Number one, I would look at some definitions and classifications, incorporate state definitions into Class 1 and 2, Class 2 e-bikes and electric scooters. I would separately define electric dirt bikes, e-motor devices, or modified devices or overpowered devices. A lot of the questions that come up are use of those devices on public property, multi-use paths, sidewalks, who can operate them, what age can be operated at. You did mention sidewalks and bike paths. I'll address that real quick. So e-bikes or any of these other devices are not currently allowed on any sidewalks in Schenectady. There's no bike path that designates that they can be used there. There needs to be a special designation. So to answer your question about the bike lanes, I mean, bike lanes are great, but there's still legislation that governs the use of these where you just have to stay to the right of the road, and you have to yield to pedestrians, and you have to follow the rules of the road. You can do that on any road. So besides definitions and classification, the state strictly prohibits anyone under the age of 16 for operating any of these devices, Class 1, 2, or any other device. So I would recommend establishing clear local procedure for that. One thing I think about is when we run into these kids, say we have someone on a dirt bike doing wheelies in the intersection of State and Brandywine. We have a case where somebody was doing this repeatedly. Every time I'm on a traffic detail, I would see these kids in traffic doing wheelies, playing chicken with cars. And every time we try to interact with them, they would take off. So in the case where they don't take off, now what do we do with this bike? Do we tell them, hey, you're not allowed to ride this, and then give it back to them, and on the way home they get killed? Or do we take it and we ask for a parent or guardian to show up, bring proof of ownership, and we turn the bike over to them that way? And when they do that, we provide them with some we provide them with some education. So we'll go over the laws, go over their responsibilities, stuff like that. Another consideration would be require helmets. So helmet laws are kind of all over the place as far as what's required by the state, but we do, or you do have the authority to require helmets of all ages. We could look at other local restrictions to mirror state law prohibiting sidewalk operation. That also prohibits operation on any roadways over 30 miles per hour in the state. We could specifically identify public parks, school grounds, business zones, playgrounds, trails, and other city properties. Again, they're already banned from operating in these spaces, but it's just not clear. There's a lot of misinformation out there. I would also suggest we address unsafe operation. So I'm talking about reckless, careless, negligent operation, unsafe speed for the conditions, wheelies, tricks in traffic, weaving between vehicles, failure to yield to pedestrians and vehicles, unlawful passengers. I'm seeing people going down the street on these bikes with infants in their arms, which is obviously very dangerous. Towing things, towing other vehicles, towing attachments. All these things, I think, endanger both people and property. We could also address specifically fleeing police when a lawful order to stop is given. Obviously, that's covered by state law, but it's just another thing that we could add as a educational component to our city. Equipment and visibility. So the legal bikes have the same requirements as bicycles and other motor vehicles. We could again state that through the local code. We could also address modification, tampering, and there could be graduated penalties. So if you have a minor infraction, let's say you have a modest civil fine of $50 for your first offense, and the second offense it goes up because you've had a chance to have some education on the topic and what you should and shouldn't be doing. And if that conduct rises to dangerous conduct or criminal conduct, then we can start looking at higher fines and impoundment.
Are there any other questions or comments for Lieutenant Dalton? Go ahead, please.
Yes, so I want to point out this isn't entirely to ensure that we're protecting the life of not only the operators, but also traffic also using and pedestrians. And as Lieutenant Dalton just outlined, there poses significant safety risk to all three. I want to caution the council, though, against making a performative legislative adjustment. And then if you can talk, Lieutenant Dalton, about just how enforceable these suggestions are and kind of what the expectations are currently for your officers. I just think that would help outline just the gravity of the situation and make sure we have an understanding of what we can reasonably do.
Sure. So I've looked at other cities, other places. One of the best local laws I found in the state recently enacted by Suffolk County. I believe it's Suffolk County Local Law 6-2026. I can make copies available to you, or you can find it online. They have a great legislative intent listed in there as far as why the legislation is going in. I did draw up some preliminary scenarios of what it could look like for local laws here. So I'll just read a couple real quick, and you can let me know if that answers your questions. So we have a compliant Class 1 or Class 2 e-bike, an actual e-bike. So the primary treatment would be it's a lawful device subject to state and local operating rules of the road, basic safety. Recommended city response to that would be educations, warnings, or citations depending on the conduct and history of conduct. There's a separate set of rules for electric scooters. So again, that'd be a lawful device subject to 15-mile-an-hour state limit and local rules. Again, recommended response through legislation would be education, warning, civil citation, depending on conduct and history. We have operator under 16, so any of these devices statewide, no one under 16 is able to operate these on public roadways. City response would be recommended temporary safekeeping, impound, release to parent, guardian, or adult, proof of ownership. Continued underage operation should not be permitted after police contact by the parents. law should provide for temporary safekeeping unless a parent, guardian, adult owner is present and can immediately take custody of the device. Addressing missing and altered labels. If we can't classify or verify a device, perhaps a citation, inspection, or temporary hold for investigation on determining what that device is. Overpowered devices over 750 watts, excessive assisted speed, no operable pedals, or motorcycle or e-moto style devices that we see out there. They don't qualify as a lawful e-bike. Apply the current city code, but I would ask that we expressly include the over 750 watts in the current code. And we also need state registration, insurance, equipment, and licensing laws for some of these off-road devices. So again, I would just include that in there. One of the gaps we have right now with the current law is, again, each device being subject to interpretation. So, potentially we could get two of the same devices, get two different judges, two different sets of circumstances. It might get classified locally as two different devices and then be treated differently. So, we try to get some, get everybody on the same page so all these things are treated the same way. In response to reckless operation or failure to obey a lawful order, if we're looking at serious local safety violations, possible state offenses, citations or arrest if appropriate, maybe an evidence-based impound or enhanced penalties for repeated conduct, again, similar to the current dirt bike law that we have.
Thank you.
Go ahead, please.
Thank you, Lieutenant. Have you heard anything like on a state level, especially Department of Motor Vehicle, they may be coming up with licensing and/or insurance required on these devices?
No, on the legal devices, the class 1 and 2s and the legal e-scooters, there is specifically no licensing or insurance requirements. You also cannot register them, which is another point that the public could probably use some education on, because people hear, I don't have to register this, as I can drive this on the road without registering it, when really it's just illegal. You can't register it. So those two things don't add up. The problem with the state law is every device has a definition somewhere, another law somewhere else that points to it. So some of these things you're required to have a license for. Some of these things you need a motorcycle license for. Some of these things you have to have insurance, you have to have registration. Some of them you have to have insurance and registration, but it's an off-road vehicle and can only be operated on private property. So the laws are all there, it's just so many in so many different places, pointing to so many different devices, it can get overwhelming.
Go ahead, please.
What is the protocol when the kids flee from the officers when they're trying to get them to stop? What is the protocol for that?
So generally, we have a no pursuit policy. So if they take off, we just let them go. If there's something else involved, like a serious felony or a gun or some sort of threat to public safety, then we would pursue them.
Go ahead, please.
So, I had been speaking with the fire department months ago about storage of these types of vehicles, and we hadn't gotten very far in that discussion. But I was wondering if you had thought about that at all in terms of, well, and I know it's probably more for the fire department, but in terms of fire safety, in terms of storage in a garage or that type of thing. And I think that the bikes have improved since they were first introduced, and there were issues around, there were more issues around fire, but I didn't know if you had any thoughts on that, or if it's something I should continue to try to research, or seems to be a non-issue now.
No, I think it's something definitely valid to look at. I would talk more with the fire department about it. Anecdotally, I've gotten complaints about fires these things have started, especially if they're damaged and continue to operate, or they're trying to illegally modify these things and can burn out the battery or cause different problems.
So some of this might be able to be worked into a similar package, I guess is what I'm saying in terms of legislation.
Mr. Chairman, just to follow up on what the Lieutenant just said and what you just said, I think a working group of the police department and the fire department should probably get together on this. There are issues in the city of New York about the storage of e-bikes in apartment buildings, and so old apartment buildings are going up. So there's still an issue, as the lieutenant said, there's still an issue because these batteries are modified in ways that are a fire hazard. So I think that I would recommend to the council you do this as a complete package, that you deal with the fire safety issues as well as the traffic safety issues. I'm not hearing anything here that you want to outlaw these e-bikes, e-scooters completely, but rather you are looking towards putting a regime together, like what's done in Suffolk County that Lieutenant Dalton has just kind of give us an overview on. So I recommend that the law department and the police department, fire department get together and work up a omnibus piece of legislation to deal with traffic safety issues as well as the fire safety issues, and that way it's done as one package.
Yeah, I'm sorry, that reminds me, the question was asked, I never completely answered it, involving the retailers. So one of my notes here is, we need to consult with the city engineering, parks, police department, school representatives, traffic safety personnel, community stakeholders, and local retailers regarding enforceability, signage, storage, and public education. A lot of the misinformation I see come out there, again, people come in and they say, hey, the guy said I could do this when I bought it. And they're sort of surprised when they spent $2,000, $3,000 on this device and find out what they can and can't do. There's also some requirements from DMV for selling some of these devices, especially if you sell more than 5 in a year. It's sort of like same thing as selling a motor vehicle, where you have to be specifically licensed to do that. So I know someone asked that earlier to answer, but that's what we got to do with retailers.
Are there any other questions or comments?
I would say, one, I appreciate the information, and I definitely took away some better understandings myself. I hope that members of the council and the community and viewers listening in as well. I would say a recommendation beyond Mr. O'Brien. I think as a council we can compile where I think immediate points of the city ordinances that we are kind of shifting towards, and then transition that over to that working group outlined to be the law department, police department, and fire department. Mr. Mayor, if you don't see any issues with that, I think we can hopefully have an update by the next cycle. Thank you.
All right, hearing no other questions or comments, thank you, Lieutenant Dalton. Thank you for all the information. I also appreciate you meeting with me last week to go over everything. So thank you ahead of time. There is nothing else to come before public safety. I will call for a motion to adjourn.
So,
All in favor?
At this time, I'd like to call government operations at 6:03 p.m. We have 2 items on the agenda. You'll see one on the agenda. The second one came in a little late. It's the request for a CR for Caribbean Day Festival on September 12th. This is a festival that's been done at Central Park. Each year it's been a wonderful time. So this is just the resolution to celebrate that day in the city of Schenectady. Is there any comments, questions, concerns on that added item? Do I have a motion to move it?
Second.
It's been moved and properly seconded. All those in favor?
Aye.
Second item on the agenda, we move down to discussion to amend Chapter 28 City Council to address the prolonged absences. Council President Carl Williams.
Thank you. We initiated the conversation last week. However, 2 of our council members were not present. With you today is a working draft built by Mr. O'Brien. Thank you for taking that time in consideration. I took language primarily from the second-class city law, and what I believe it extended beyond that was it incorporated the ability for the individual who is out for extended absence to be able to kind of state their position for such reasoning, and I think one that empowers them to address their concerns in a just I think legislatively tangible format. But then also beyond that, the stipulation for the recorder's vote, why I feel confident if there is any hesitancy with that language is that that allows the ability for, I think, those multifaceted conversations that extend beyond those voter blocks that some of our residents kind of are weary of, and ensures that these discussions are being considered by the majority of the council, not a simple majority. So I would like to get any comments or opinions, but again, this is just to address the fact that our council has no ability to address or to speak towards extended absences. And the second-class city law outlines 2 months. I thought it was appropriate to incorporate that additional third month. And this would be speaking to issues where it is consecutively.
Any comments, questions, concerns? Councilwoman Patrick?
Yes, I'd like to know whether there would be anything in here to allow for if someone had an illness, an extended illness that might mean that they needed to be absent for longer than 3 months. I don't see it in there, but
Council President Williams?
Go ahead. I will refer to Mr. O'Brien.
It sets a benchmark of 3 consecutive months. So and then the person can go to the council member, can go to the other members of the council and say, I'm having issues, I'm asking for permission. Since the council can do the greater, which is remove somebody, they can do the lesser, which is grant an extension for that person's. So the idea is that the person can go before the council colleagues and say, I need some time for whatever reason, and that it would be could be granted by the members of the council. That language of council approval comes from the city of Oswego's charter. They say without council permission. So the idea is that there would be a dialogue with the council members regarding another colleague's absence.
Councilman Hager?
So I see the 3 months. Are we talking 3 months in a row, or are we talking
Consecutive.
consecutive? Okay, thank you.
Councilwoman DeVore?
Thank you. Please excuse my absence on the 3rd. A very dear friend of mine passed.
Yes, ma'am.
I didn't get a chance to really make any statements or whatever, but I think we have to be extremely careful with this amendment. We should never create a process where the majority of the council gets to decide who they want sitting next to them. Our seats belong to the voters, and that's who put us here, and our job is to protect their representation, not to choose a preferred colleague if there's a vacancy. This process should be transparent, fair, meaningful, and ultimately serve the people who elected us. And let us not forget, this happened recently. We have seen this before during President Porterfield's time as council president. 16 people came forward for a vacant seat created by Joe Mancini. The interviews were extremely brief, 2 minutes. Besides myself and Ms. Patrick, no one else on the council had more than one question, and a couple of the council members asked the same question. The interviews were extremely brief, and the system was extremely flawed. And what concerned me the most at that time was Ms. Porterfield had already lost her bid for re-election, but yet she was still allowed to select who was going to be seated next to us. So I think moving forward, I'm not in favor of this at all. Obviously, Ms. Patrick came back. It was more than 3 months. God bless her. She's healthy. She's moving forward. I don't think we should make any amendment to this whatsoever. Let me see if I have any other notes here. Pardon me? Another thing was, let me see where my note is here. Just bear with me a moment. Oh, and if this amendment is anyway directed at Councilman Patrick or myself or anyone else who needs to be out more than 3 months, then we need to look at the circumstances fairly. Ms. Patrick on this council was not giving a committee chairmanship, and because committees consist of only 3 members, the committees she does serve on often have little business before them. So while she's fully capable of participating, she frequently has very little opportunity to cast a deciding committee vote. That context matters when we talk about somebody's level of participation. And regardless of circumstances, no elected council member should be subject to intimidating emails over an absence. We should establish one fair standard that applies equally to every council member. Thank you.
Yes, ma'am. Council President Winfield, 1 second. I just want to make sure to address, as Chair Committee, thank you for your comments, sentiment. I want to make sure everyone understands that we are not addressing the appointment process that took place. Mr. Mancini resigned willingly, knowing that he was not well, understanding he would be missing significant time from my understanding based on prior conversations, which opened that appointment process, which every candidate got the exact same amount of time, conversational points, and the opportunity to present themselves willingly to this council, prior council before Councilman Patrick, and I hate that this is the talking point as you come back because it just happened to you. This is a conversation. I want to make sure that as we direct our talking points, we talk about it in general. This is not to be targeting of one council member. This did happen prior in 2012. This is the same thing that we've seen happen in council with elongated absences prior to Councilman Patrick. So I just want to caution us from using her as an example just out of kindness to her being at the table. And I want to make sure that we also take that at the time when she was absent due to the health, she wouldn't have been able to chair any committee. As she comes back now, against the wishes of her doctors to help us have a full council, I want us to make sure that we're not overloading her either. I have no say in what committee anyone has. I'm not that type of power here, but I just want to make sure that we are all on the same page with what we're discussing for this chapter amendment. Council President Williams.
Thank you. So I made some bullets just so I had those topics, Councilwoman DeToro, so I responded to them entirely.
Yeah.
With response to the harassment emails, I plan to make those public because that statement truly is disparaging. I think if an individual is seeking information because none has been provided, that is to be afforded, especially to the council president. And that has been the circumstances that I've been working within. There's been no information shared proactively. Anything that I've received was asked, and the nature of what I got back was not sufficient to what was being shared via the media. So I would say that it was challenging to work within an environment where I didn't have an expectation of how long and to what extent an individual would not be returning back. And that is not reflective on the individual, that's reflective on the system that empowers and supports that moving forward. With respect to the differences between a vacancy and an absence, those create different scenarios in which to respond to. Former council member Mancini vacated his seat. Talking about the previous 2 interactions that the city council has experienced, those are due to extended absences. So I'd say let's not conflate those 2 topics or inaccurately outline that those are 2 different things. Next, with respect to the appointment process, I've been very clear on outlining that that process can be further perfected or improved upon. There is no perfect system or no perfect process. However, what was undertaken by our former council president, Porterfield, was significantly better than previous circumstances. That is non-debatable. It was better. Now, can we improve on that moving forward? Absolutely. If we were put in a similar situation, I would hope that moving forward, council members would be knowledgeable and aware to fulfill their terms. But if we were ever put in a similar situation, I'm confident that this council would build upon the structure that was put in place by our previous city council president, Ms. Porterfield. Next is to outline that the council would not be taking any action that is not already approved. The second-class city law already allows us to perform this reasonably. We are having to put this in place to codify it, to ensure that this takes out any consideration from us as individual council members, and it's the only way for us to enact that. Is that correct, Corporation Council?
The second-class cities law, section 34, speaks to the 2 consecutive months of absences, and that the council has that authority to common council expel a member or declare the seat vacant by reasons of absence. The Common Council shall determine, in first line, it says the Common Council shall determine the rules of its own proceedings and be the judge of election returns and the qualifications of its members. And then it goes on to say, if there's 2 months, what the proposed legislation is going an extra month, the minimum is 2 pursuant to state law. It's being extended out another month. And it says, consecutive months, it doesn't go into meetings. The city of Troy talks about meetings. The city of Oswego talks about months. And adds in the proviso that, without the council permission, if somebody's absent without the council permission. So there isn't that same language in the city charter in Troy or the statute. It's without permission.
Thank you. So I think a further comment is if an individual has any issue with that language, to me, they should take it up with their state or federal representative because it is already in place. And then lastly, I'd like to outline that if we are now debating how efficient someone can be in a duty if they are absent for more than 3 months, I don't know any employment or profession that you can reasonably maintain that. And that is all that I'm outlining. If we are supposed to do the work of the community, how can you do that by being gone for a quarter of the year?
Councilman Patrick, do you want to subject to the mayor first?
I will, yeah.
I'll defer to the council member.
A couple of things. I think in terms of, I think that leaving it open to other council members deciding that, I mean, I hate to say it, I'm sure it wouldn't happen with this particular council, but there could be instances where people had personal disagreements or personal biases against one another. And if they were successful at, having a majority vote or however, I mean, that would also have to be one of the considerations, like what would be the number of votes, for example, that would have to happen in order for this to be activated. I mean, somebody asked to be resigned, somebody asked to resign. So I think that, that's one aspect of it, the bias piece. I think someone said something about permission to have I'm sorry, Council Sean, could you just talk about that again, please?
It says, the city of Troy's, for correction, says inexcusably, the city of Troy's charter says inexcusably absent for 3 successive meetings. They talk about 3 successive meetings in the city of Troy. And then the city of Oswego says, the council shall have the power to expel a member who shall have been absent without the council's permission for 2 consecutive months. And then, of course, there's the absent member shall be given a chance to be heard, which the proposed legislation has that as well as the state legislation.
So I think having the council's permission might be a little tricky, depending on the folks around the table and the extent to which they were looking to, for example, appoint someone. I mean, again, what happens when the seat is open? Does the council just get to appoint somebody? Again, how do they determine who they're going to appoint? And how does that how does that come down? I still think that, again, and I know it's hard not to take it personally, and I know I shouldn't be, but when you're elected by the community, it's hard to think about the fact that then a smaller group of people get to make a decision that overrides what the voters have determined by electing someone to these seats. So I bring that point up as well. And I think, again, I think there should be language in there about medical instances, because, sometimes it's going to be unavoidable for a medical reason.
Thank you. Councilwoman Patrick, thank you so much. And just so you know, I would 100% vote to keep you on the council again. So don't make any assumptions. You'd still be here regardless. I care about you that much from our time on the County Board of Trustees.
Thank you,
Absolutely.
Councilman Chairs.
Council, I just wanted for clarification for her ask and question, looking at that vote, if that vote was to be taking place and we did that, it would still have to be a majority vote, which then the mayor could veto because he had to go to resolution, or would it be
It's, well, it's-
based on that, based on the state, because it's not the same as a regular appointment, it's due to
Well,
vacancy.
the state law allows the council to expel a council member for absence. So it's right there. It's right there in the second-class cities law. The council has that authority. From what looking I've found is that most they don't go into the detail of this. The city of Troy has some language. The city of Oswego has some language. Other places just talk in broad terms. They don't put numbers on things. They just don't get into that detail. But it's 3/4 majority, which is 5.25 members. And Robert's rules says you go up to 6. So basically, it would be everybody.
Unanimous.
It would have to be unanimous except for the one council. So it's 5.25 members. It's a super majority, and it's 6 members in reality under Robert's rules.
And one more point before I yield the floor, if I may.
Yes, ma'am.
I think that as we continue this discussion, I think it's also, if we're going to continue the discussion and move forward with thinking about this, there's the ideas of, I just lost my train of thought, sorry. So I will put it for now, I'm sure it'll come back.
I will come back to Mayor McCarthy.
If I were you, I would take it personally.
Don't.
The council, over time, the attendance has gone downhill. A number of years that I've had the opportunity to serve the city. And so it's already on the books where you can deal with it. Now you're going to create something that's maybe not quite as stringent as what's the state law, but something that's there. But if somebody missed every other meeting, so they're only here half the time, that's fine. Now, if somebody missed 3 months, which is a quarter of the time, we got to get rid of them. So I think you ought to look at the overall attendance and how do you deal with that? And just generally, it's duplicative legislation. It's already on the books statewide. Hate to bring up garbage, Carl, look forward to working with you. It's going to have, we were going to do the garbage container size, didn't do that. Going to change the rotation of our pickup date, didn't do that. I still need a quantity of garbage at the curb that determines what a jackpot is. The council has not enacted that. It becomes very hard to manage that. It becomes very hard to put incentives in place. And so spinning your wheels on something that's already in state law, God bless you, but I think it's a waste of time.
Mr. Mayor,
So, no,
Mr. Mayor, I appreciate your statements, and Councilman, I will allow you to retort. I want to make sure that we're focusing once again on the topic at hand. For the amendment to Section 28, Chapter 28, Councilwoman Patrick, please don't take it personal. If we took everything personal at this table, some of us would probably be outside, and that's a different conversation, right? Also, we want to make sure we're having these discussions, so this way we're not wasting $50,000 to $100,000 in taxpayer dollars on frivolous debates. So we want to make sure that we stay focused on the task at hand, and that's why we bring these discussions before the council to make sure things get done legislatively and correctly. Council President Williams.
Yep, so I'd say, Mr. Mayor, moving forward, I expect to be referred to as Council President or Mr., which is due to the fact that I was elected similar to yourself, and I would like to highlight that your disrespect for certain members of this council is duly noted. It is unfortunate that your level of comment and feedback is reserved only in these instances where you do so to demean or belittle our efforts, but I'd like to outline that it is something that I'm not going to allow to dissuade the council from pursuing an action that is tangible and important to the aspect of governing this city moving forward. So I would say if there are any productive discussions that you would like to be included on, I appreciate that. But moving forward, sir, I would ask that if you have any similar retorts, just keep those to yourself. But with respect to this conversation, I would like to outline that I'm confident that us taking the steps beyond the second-class city law ensures that we are being responsible in creating legislation that addresses our issues as a city of Schenectady. And I think that is our responsibility to make sure we are not broad stroking or broadly applying legislation if it doesn't meet the conditions and the necessary reasonings for us. If it doesn't, I would agree, we don't need to apply that. But this is why going above that ensures that we are taking into addressing all aspects of what it means to be a Schenectady elected official and not just applying something because it already exists.
Councilman Williams, any comments, questions, concerns on this discussion?
Well, I'll just make, and I did remember what it was that I was going to say before, which is that I think that if this discussion continues, if we need to continue this discussion, there's other aspects that can be considered, like, for example, do we try to allow someone to be able to watch the meeting by video or even vote by, not by video, but you know what I'm saying, that not have to be personally sitting at this table, but be able to take part in the discussion through Zoom like we did during COVID. And I think that we voted during COVID too, which was, I know the governor had passed that legislation that allowed us to do that for a couple of years and then took that away from us. But I'm just saying, I think it's very important that we're all here. Don't get me wrong. And I do think, I even felt then, I mean, the longer that we, had that go on, I mean, I think it opened up some of the rude behavior and the disrespect that did happen because I think people weren't sitting. Now, needless to say, that has continued even face to face. However, I just think that there's other aspects of this. If we're going to look at it, we should look big picture at it in terms of all aspects of it, like being able to watch something on television, which I did while I was out, I just want to say, watch the meetings on television.
Thank you, Councilman Patch. Councilman Dotoro?
Thank you. I guess my question is, no, I lost my train of thought.
Sorry.
Ms. Patrick, that's okay. Since there's a discussion, it can go around and around and around. I'm not in favor of it. I'm wondering what my other council members, associates think of it. And if we're going to bring it back in another 2 weeks, I don't think the discussion around the table will change. So at this point, I'd like to hear what everyone else seems to think about it. Yep.
Council President Williams?
So I'd say one of my kind of final comments, because I do agree with you, these conversations cannot be circular. I think that they are progressing because the comment made about having virtual attendance be applicable, I am not in favor of that, but if that's something that others would support to ensure that we're moving forward in an inclusive manner, I can and I will, and that's the spirit of compromise. But I was like, but if you intentionally highlight that a conversation is not going to be productive, it won't be productive. But I think we should be confident in knowing that as long as we're entering these conversations with the best of intent in mind, I think that the language can shift, but I intend to ask the council to review the language. I do intend to bring it back in 2 weeks with an action in mind, but beyond that, right, it is whatever the council dictates and I'm only one vote.
Thank you.
Councilman
Thank you.
Dotoro?
I know I did ask our city clerk and I believe Corporation Counsel when I was caring for my brother last year if there's any way I could vote via Zoom or whatever, and maybe Corporation Counsel can help me with that.
There has to be a local law developed.
Local law only?
All that, the emergency order was vacated, so now it has to be done under specific requirements, under specific, there's specific requirements under the law, specific excuses why an individual can't come. And also, you have to be mindful, do you want to open that up to not only this body, but the zoning board of appeals, the planning board, the assessment board, or that's something, the minute you do that, other members of other boards will say, why can't we do that? So be mindful of that, but it would have to be by local law under the requirements of the state enabling legislation for doing that.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councilman. I think that you make a very good point in setting a dangerous precedent, as Mr. Anger had said 2 weeks prior, of understanding that one, if the mayor is correct that attendance is already down, we'll probably see attendance sink quite a bit, correct? That would be a good assumption of our, you don't have that, I know, you wouldn't have that data and information, but we can say with the Zoom calls available, some of us have to travel for work and other things instead of having to make our way back. I know I came here right after a funeral myself and still serve on this council, and I don't expect that from my other colleagues, council members, but that is the dedication that I believe you sign up for when you become a public servant. If there's any other comments, questions, or concerns, seeing none, this does not need a vote or action. Do I have a motion to close Committee of Government Operations? It's been moved and properly seconded. All those in favor?
Aye.
Council is closed. Government Operations closed at 6:30.
Thank you. I'd like to call the Finance Committee to order. We have one item, and it's tax exemption for veterans with 100% disability. Mr. Williams.
Thank you. I know there were some copies to pass around to the council. If you don't have those, we just make those available to everyone thereafter. Ready for those emails?
Yes, please.
Okay.
That's right, executive session.
Perfect. So, Mr. Moran, I believe there are other aspects of this that need to be discussed in executive session, but I can give a just overall view of the intent. There was a recent legislation passed at the state that allows for individuals with 100% service disabilities to be tax exempt. I think as we just can openly acknowledge the level of commitment that it takes for not just an individual, but also for their family, I think looking at these types of relief efforts is something that we should unquestionably support, or I will just point out that I will as a service member as well. But sincerely, there needs to be a city ordinance passed. There are some additional details that need to be discussed in executive session, but this change would not happen for this fiscal year, so we don't have to worry about any budget implications, at least for the next 2 years.
Mr. Chairman, I'm just saying, this has to be done by local law. If you want to opt into this, local law means that it would be introduced the next committee session is because of the schedule, I believe, is September 8th, and then the next council meeting would be September 14th, if I'm tracking correctly. So a local law is different from an ordinance. A local law means it has to be introduced. It'll be introduced, let's say, on the 14th. It'll be voted at a committee, the next committee meeting on the 8th. Then presented for introduction purposes only on the 14th. It would lay on the table for 2 weeks, and then it would be action be taken. If it's passed by the council, then it goes to the mayor because he has veto authority, and under the municipal home law, he holds the public hearing within X amount of days after having the legislation delivered to him by the city clerk, and then he takes action on it, either approve or vetoing. If it's approved, it goes on to the Secretary of State's office, and it doesn't become effective until it's filed with the Secretary of State's office. Other sections in this particular chapter dealing with veterans exemptions have also always been done by local law. Enabling this legislation by the state is very specific, where it's done by local law, and that's the process. So we could draft something for the committee's consideration for next time out, and that would be for review, and then if it could be marked up on the 8th, and then it can be voted out at the committee for introduction purposes only for September 14th. If that's something you want to do.
It's my understanding that the committee is also looking to adopt this.
Yes,
How is that going to benefit, or does that benefit us in any way?
Each locality, each taxing district, school districts can opt in by resolution, counties can do it by local law. As far as the tax implications, I can't speak to that directly, but each taxing locality can opt into it. They're given that local option.
Go ahead, please.
One, thank you, Councilman President Williams, for bringing this forward. I know that Saratoga just recently passed this as well. And the state law does read, as it says, if your locality, municipality allows it based on budget and financing process to do it or to push it out time frame wise, so you can properly budget into the 2028, 2029 year if you need to, based on your projections. But I would want to go on record and say I 100% support this and appreciate the veterans that served in our city and come back any way that we can help them, make sure that they don't fall into any kind of disarray when it comes to taxes in their house and city. They've earned it. They deserve to be here and live comfortably while they served our country and kept us all safe. So, go ahead, please.
Thank you. I agree with Mr. Chairs. Not too familiar with what the tax exempt is for a veteran right now. I realized that this would be 100%. And I did read the information that Josh sent out to us through our assessor. And I'd be interested to hear exactly how many properties this would represent here in our city. Looking forward to hearing from her.
Go ahead, please.
And then just anecdotally, service members represent a small fraction of the population, and then now referencing 100% service disabilities is significantly smaller. When I talked to Ms. McElroy, she was confident this would not overwhelm the tax budget. It's just putting in place this local ordinance to just address this one segment of the community.
Thank you. So, and Bill Frank was a service veterans agent for years, advocated for Agent Orange and Vietnam veterans. And I do know several of them, you know, whether it's 10, 20, 30, but a lot of them were 100% qualified. So I thank him for the work he's done for the residents here in our city, veterans. So thank you.
Mr. Chairman, this is going to be prospectively a taxable status date as of January 1st, 2027.
So are you still looking for this to go into executive session?
I don't believe we need to now.
Oh,
I don't believe we need to now.
okay. Are you going to have this back? Go ahead, please.
Sorry. I was asking if we had the numbers available today, if he did all right to present in executive. No.
The numbers are not. So we'll have to follow and make sure that we have those data and provide it to the council. And we can move forward.
With the
In the meantime,
draft,
should we call for the public hearing?
No, you don't have to do a public hearing. The mayor does a public hearing. So we will prepare a draft for your consideration for the next committee and then cycle on the 8th of September. If it's okay with the council, then it'll be voted out for introduction purposes only for the following Monday, which is the 14th.
And Josh, can you please make notes of what is required and the data that is required? And we can follow up and have those data available.
Yeah.
Thank you. Any other businesses for finance? Seeing none, may I have a motion to adjourn?
Motion.
second.
All in favor? Aye. Thank you.
So I'd like to call to order City Development and Planning. We have 10 original items on the agenda. There's going to be adding 2 additional. The first is discussion about a redemption for property 1044 Helderberg, and the second is about leniency towards property 7 Chester Street. And starting with item number 1, award bidding contract for PTL Arthur Chairs Lane Water Main Extension to W&J Keller and Sons Construction Corporation in the amount of $109,321. Ms. LaFawn?
The legislative request for me in front of you is to extend the water line on Arthur Chairs to Ashland. Right now, on the water line, there is a dead end line. Dead end lines are not a good thing to happen in the city because it creates stagnation in the water. So the water quality over by the greenhouses has to be flushed quite often. So the work that's being done in the park, that road is scheduled to be repaired next year, I think. So we're looking at extending that water line so it creates a loop in the system that's constantly flowing, and it creates a higher quality water for that area. There were 4 bids received. William J. Keller was the lowest responsible bidder, in the amount of $109,321. The funding would come from the Capital Water Fund, which is set aside for these projects. Chris Wallen would have been here. He was on vacation. So.
Thank you. Any questions or comments?
I'll move this.
Second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Thank you.
Thank you. Have a good evening.
The next item is a discussion for the Housing Stability Task Force recommendation and responses to submitted questions. Ms. Councilwoman Quiggins.
Good evening. I'm going to start off with Mr. Anger's questions. If Schenectady already has housing programs, why add another layer of rules? The answer to that is extending housing programs provide important assistance, but they do not provide the same protection as good cause eviction. Rental assistance helps tenants pay rent. Housing counseling helps tenants and landlords resolve problems. Code enforcement addresses unsafe conditions. Homeless services assist people who are already experiencing housing instability. Good cause address a different issue, preventing the displacement of tenants who is complying with the terms of tenancy when there is no legal recognized reason for removal. Schenectady has a substantial rental population and documented housing instability. Therefore, the task force concluded that extending programs should continue while the city considers whether an additional tenant stability tool is necessary. Good cause is not a replacement for existing housing programs. It addresses a gap that those programs do not address. Number 2, how did the task force decide that these rules would help tenants more than they would hurt housing supply? The answer to that is the task force conclusion was based on a documented need for greater housing stability in Schenectady. The task force was not charged with proving that the good cause would have absolutely no effect on housing supply. It was charged with assessing the potential impact of good cause and considering alternatives. The available local data demonstrates significant housing instabilities, evictions, activity affordability concerns, and rental vulnerability. The task force therefore determined that the stability is a legitimate policy concern that warrants action. At the same time, the task force recommend additional housing market research and better local data so the city can measure the effect of any policy on housing supply rents, landlords, and tenants. The recommendation recognizes a documented housing stability problem while calling for continued measurements of the housing supply impact. Number 3, how would the city enforce these new rules without adding more work for staff and the courts? The answer to that is good cause would operate through existing landlord-tenant legal process. It does not require the city to create an entirely separate court system. However, implementation will require clear procedures and education for landlords and tenants. The city should monitor the number and type of cases, court outcomes, administrative costs, and housing market effects after implementation. The city should establish a clear implementation process and measure the actual administrative impact rather than assume what the impact would be. Number 4, what proof do you have that the good cause would actually help Schenectady renters? The local evidence establishes that Schenectady has a housing stability problem. The task force reviewed eviction activity, housing affordability, rent burden, and other housing indicators as required by the council charge. The city's own records identify eviction filings, rent burdens, and housing market conditions as areas to be examined. This information is noted in the Electric City Recharge Phase 1 report in the Housing of Social Economic section. Good cause is designed to provide tenants with additional protection against certain no-cause displacement. The task force is not claiming that good cause will prevent every eviction. It provides protection against a specific type of displacement while preserving lawful grounds for eviction. The evidence establishes the needs for greater housing stability. Good cause is a tool intended to address one part of that problem. Number 5, how did the task force decide whether these protections would help low-income tenants move more than they would make small landlords leave the rental market? The answer to that is the task force considered both tenants and landlords. The task force position is that housing stability requires both responsible tenants and responsible landlords. The city should not ignore the concerns of small landlords, nor should the city assume that the tenants could absorb unnecessary displacement without consequences. The task force considered that the interests of both sides recommends continued monitoring of the effect on small landlords and the rental market. Number 6, if the report needed an outside group to get the full picture, why did the task force make a recommendation instead of waiting for that review? The answer to that is since the task force was created to evaluate the issue in our city and provide recommendations to the council, an outside study was recommended to provide additional independent analysis, not because the task force was incapable of making a recommendation. The task force reviewed the information available, heard stakeholders' perspectives, and identified areas where additional data would strengthen future decisions. The task force completed its assignment while also identifying information that should be studied further. Where is the local, at number 7, excuse me. Where is the local evidence showing that good cause would reduce forced moves in Schenectady instead of simply changing the eviction process? The answer to that is the local evidence established that eviction and housing instability are significant issues in Schenectady. The existing data does not provide an exact number of forced moves that good cause would prevent. The next appropriate step is to improve local data collection so that the city can distinguish between eviction filings, completed evictions, voluntary moves, non-payment cases, lease violations, and renewals. The local evidence establishes the housing stability problem. Continued data collection is necessary to measure good cause precise impact. Number 8. The report says 120 days timeline was too short for volunteers. If the process was not complete, why should the council treat the recommendations as final? And the answer to that was the 120-day period was the timeline established by council for the task force to complete its work and present findings and recommendations. The task force recommendations are not legislation and do not bind the council. Council has the authority to accept, reject, modify, or request additional information regarding any recommendations. The task force responsibility was to complete the assigned work and report its findings. The task force made recommendations. Council makes the final policy decisions. Number 9, the report says the task force should have kept meeting before making a final decision. What was still not settled when the vote happened? The answer to that is there are implementations and data data questions that remain appropriate for continued council review, including the precise implementation of good cause and the impact on small landlords, city administration, and the impact of the courts, housing market effects, and better local evictions and displacement data. This will require additional independent housing research. Housing production, home ownership opportunities, and long-term housing stability strategies should be included in this study. These issues do not invalidate the task force recommendation. The task force completed its assignment and continued policy development remains the responsibility of the council. Moving on to President Carl Williams' questions. Additional questions regarding code enforcement, Schenectady Municipal Housing Authority, and task force leadership. What is the average response time for code enforcement's complaints that do not involve immediate life safety concerns? The answer to that is the task force does not have a verified average response time figure that it can responsibly provide. The number must come directly from the city codes enforcement department using its complaint records. An email with these questions was sent to the building inspector, Brian Trency, but no response was received. The task force responsibility was to identify housing conditions and gaps in the city's housing stability system, not to create departmental statistics that were not provided to the task force. Code enforcement must provide the official response time data. Number 2, on average, how many daily patrols are conducted each day, week, and can those patrols be broken down by neighborhoods or zip codes? The task force was not provided with the verified citywide patrol schedule or the neighborhoods by zip code patrol data set. The information should come directly from the department responsible for those patrols. An email with these questions was sent to the building inspector, Brian Trency, but no response was received. If the council wants to evaluate whether enforcement resources and adequate distributed throughout Schenectady neighborhoods level enforcement data would be useful. This is a department operational data question, not a statistic that the task force should estimate. Number 3, looking back on the dialogue with Jeff Jackson, are there aspects of the conversation you would approach differently or recommendations you would make to improve similar discussions in the future? The answer to that, as chair, I would always look for ways to make future discussions more structured, focused, and productive. However, the purpose of the discussion was to achieve a housing provider's perspective, which was brought directly into the task force conversation. The purpose of the task force was to hear different perspectives, not to guarantee that every stakeholder would agree with the final recommendations. As chair, I facilitated the discussions, allowed the concerns to be heard, and kept the conversation connected to the task force housing stability charge. I welcome constructive criticism, but disagreement does not mean the discussion failed. When Schenectady Municipal Housing Authority terminates housing units from its program because a landlord refuses to make needed repairs, are those units subsequently monitored for compliance if they return to the general rental market? If not, how many units are removed from the Schenectady Municipal Housing Program each year for this reason? The answer to that is based on the information provided to the task force. Approximately 4 units per year on average are removed from the Schenectady Municipal Housing Authority program for this type of noncompliance. The more significant findings is that there is currently no mechanism to track these units after they leave the Schenectady Municipal Housing Authority based on the information providing they're removed from the program and they return to the general rental market. This is considered a gap. Number 5. Were any efforts made to solicit testimony or input from local landlords as part of this process? If not, what was the rationale for excluding that perspective? The answer to that is yes. Landlord input was solicited and included in the process. Small landlords were identified as stakeholder group in the city's task force structure. Excuse me, y'all, I gotta drink something. One of the task force members, Herlene Andrus, is a member of SLIC, Schenectady Landlords Influence and Change. The task force also directly invited landlord participation. The July 9th, 2006 task force agenda included Chris Morris, president of SLIC, as a guest speaker. The task force did not exclude landlords' perspective. The fact that the final recommendation may not reflect every landlord's preferred outcome. However, landlord participation was a part of the task force process, and landlords' perspectives were heard. In my closing, the Housing Stability Task Force was created to examine a complicated issue affecting both tenants and property owners. As chair, I was responsible for leading the process, keeping the discussion focused, bringing stakeholders to the table, reviewing information available, identifying gaps, and presenting recommendations to council. Where the task force had verified information, we used it. Where information was not available, we identified the gap. Where additional research is needed, we recommended it. The fact that I was a new to chairing this particular task force, accepted the responsibility, learned the material, asked questions to the people that was at the table, and completed the work assigned to me in what was a very abbreviated time frame. The task force work should be evaluated on the quality of the process and the evidence reviewed, the stakeholders heard, and the findings presented, and the recommendations. My role was to lead the process. Council's role is to decide what policy comes next. The State of the Nation's Housing 2026 report, published by the Joint Center for Housing, studied in Harvard, I have the pamphlets here, studied in Harvard University, states the following: renters unaffordably hits an all-time high. The number of cost-burdened renters hit a record high for the fourth consecutive year in 2024 at 22.7 million renters households, while the annual increase was relatively modest at 170,000. The number of cost-burdened renters households has leaped by 2.3 million since 2019. Severely cost-burdened renters drove most of the increase. There were 12.1 million severely burdened rental households in 2024, up 1.5 million since 2019. The rapid rise in rents in the early 2020s has driven up the share of cost-burdened rentals. Fully 49% of the renters burdened in 2024 is up 3.1 percentage points since 2019. Moreover, 26% of renters were severely cost burdened, an increase of 2.3 percentage points since before the pandemic. I recommend this document be used as a resource for any ongoing research and/or discussions regarding housing and good cause eviction in the city of Schenectady.
Thank you, Councilwoman Wiggins. Any questions or comments? Councilwoman Toro?
Oh, thank you. I guess my question is, I was told that the members of the task force were each asked to write a final conclusion, and I was wondering why they weren't included in the documentation.
What do you mean a final conclusion? Everything was joined together. Everybody put their recommendations in, and everything was solidified together.
I know, but did the individuals send you what their thoughts and what their suggestions were for the process, for the task force?
Yeah, good cause.
I remember, no one individually sent you what their thoughts of the task force were and what they recommended personally?
Yes.
They were asked to.
Yes. Yes.
I just wondered why they weren't included in this, their individual reports weren't included in the packet we were given.
Oh, well, I put everything together and I created a packet. I didn't identify everybody, what everybody said,
Right.
whatever. I didn't do that.
Okay. I just thought since they put it out there, we should at least see what their individual concerns were about the task force and what their suggestions were.
Councilman Ingrid?
Yes.
I just have some follow-up questions to my questions. So, question one was, if Schenectady already has housing programs, why add another layer of rules? Part of your answer said, good cause addresses a different issue, preventing the displacement of a tenant who is complying with the terms of the tenancy when there is no legally recognized reason for the removal. Do you have any specific data that shows specifically Schenectady, the statistic to show how many of those cases fall into that definition of a tenant who is complying with the terms of their tenancy when there is no legally recognized reason for removal?
I'm not sure.
Okay, I can also email them to you so you can get back to me. Number two was, how did the task force decide that these rules would help tenants more than they would hurt housing supply? Part of your answer said the task force was not charged with proving that good cause would have an absolutely no effect on housing supply. It was charged with assessing the potential impact of good cause eviction and considering alternatives. What alternatives were considered?
The alternative that was considered was based on the information that was provided and the data that was presented through SCAP and through some other research and data that was also included in the report.
Okay, so what were those alternatives based on that data provided?
I can't call it right off.
Okay, I'll include that one as well. And then finally, it says, question 4, what proof do you have that good cause would actually help Schenectady renters? Part of your answer was, good cause is designed to provide tenants with additional protection against certain no-cause displacement. The task force is not claiming that good cause would help prevent every eviction. My follow-up to that would be, how many no-cause evictions happen every year in the city of Schenectady?
None. We haven't adopted the law.
Right, so you have the data to actually track it, right? So that's an irrelevant question.
Well, I guess,
For speaking out of time, Chair, there's no data to track that.
it's still, thank you, Sean.
If other cities have adopted the law, so they can be drawn from Albany, for example.
And another thing, you have to realize this was a lot of information.
Oh, no, I appreciate
Okay, this
the
was
outline.
definitely a lot of information.
I appreciate it. Thank you very much.
Yeah, you're very
I
welcome.
think this is actually great because then we can, see the answers and then go back if we have questions and reference back. So, thank you.
Thank you, Councilman Chairs.
Yeah, absolutely. First, I just want to piggyback off of the one statement that Councilwoman Toro made. I think I'm understanding you referencing like some of the emails that two members, I believe, had sent over with their outline to us in the council, what their opinion is. I remember that two came through. One member from Slick and one person opposite of that had sent me an email. At least I'm pretty sure everyone was on it. But that would be to, and I know that some of that information, I believe it was Ms. Harleen, if I remember correctly, had sent it over. Was that correct? Harleen was on the task force?
Yeah, she was on that.
Had sent it over to us with her, where she felt about it and everything, gave us her opinion to the entire council, not me especially. But I appreciate our conversation. I don't know if it's improper to include just one person's opinion on it. I don't know. I know for a fact that not every member that was on the task force sent it over, but I do appreciate her going the extra mile to include it. But I know some of her information and points were included inside of the original document that we had. She just wasn't named as the person that said it, but her opinions were included inside that. For the talk point, I remember from last time, I feel that Councilman Ingrid, you're conflicting two different questions together. Where you're talking about if there's programs already in place in the city of Schenectady. So we're talking about programming for housing, I'm assuming is what you were talking about, that people can access, correct?
Correct.
Okay, I want to make sure I'm...
Yeah, correct.
Most people don't know about what's accessible to them. They also don't know that when these state-funded programs or county-funded programs run out of money, it's no longer accessible to them if they didn't sign up early in the year. So you're talking about a program that allows for assistance compared to a law that is protection. So they're two different things. So I remember that question from the last committee, and I just want to make sure that when you address that email to her, you're asking whatever question you really want answered, because you keep confounding two different parts.
Thank you.
Yep.
So I very much appreciate the level of explanation and taking the time to roll through and the efforts that was taken to prepare that. It definitely showed your intentionality to ensuring that you offered us comprehensive and full responses. I think also to the points of the additional alternatives, just wanted to add to that. There were additional recommendations outside of good cause eviction that were included that I thought were very worth merit, one of which is continuing to support this effort. In no way did Councilwoman Wiggins identify that this was the end-all be-all. Actually, she very openly spoke against that and said that these efforts should be continued. But I do agree, and I highlighted a few times, this is now at the council's level to make a determination. We have to make an action. We do. And it is to either enact this or something else or choose to do nothing. And I can't comfortably or confidently request us to do the latter. We have to do something. So I know that the spirit of good cause eviction, in my opinion, is often filled or fueled with misinformation. I recognize that that is a very contentious topic to outline. So one of the recommendations I was going to highlight is that we continue to bridge off of one of the recommendations from, I believe it was the rental broker, real estate broker that came and spoke.
Yes.
And he was saying his recommendation, not mine, was that absentee landlord accountability should be strengthened. If a landlord does not live within 1 hour of the property, a local management component could be required.
We already have that.
I know we have that for properties that we sell.
No, we have it in the city code.
So I would like
We
to
have a
ask.
landlord registration requirements. We do have that in the code.
So I'd like to ask the confidence of that program, because the similar kind of issues and instances, are we 100% confident that that program is up to date?
People aren't getting excited for that.
So was that?
People do get excited for that.
But again, wanting to know the confidence that we have in that program as we continue to hear of staffing shortages and also overboard workforces within City Hall. I want to get to you, Councilman Laverne. But also is highlighting some of the other lesser known issues, and I appreciate you highlighting this was a significant gap. The breakdown in SMHA properties that are no longer compliant for their programs should not be allowed to seamlessly integrate back into our community. Because even if just referencing my time on the council, that is upwards of 16 properties. And although that number fails in comparison to our global housing properties, those are still 16 families that are subjected to unfair or improperly supported properties. And again, if you are one of those 16, that means a lot to you. And the fact that we have no mechanism to address that is alarming. So I would hope that Joe's two questions are some things that we can look into as we continue hearing the good cause eviction narrative. Councilman Laverne.
No, I was just going to add to your comment with regards to all rental properties are required to have a landlord registration as part of the rental program. So it's a must. They will not issue the rental certificate until all that is in place, complete a form, insurance on file and things like that. And those things have to be updated on a regular basis, has changed in tendency. So those things are in place as part of the requirement. Just want to add to that.
Councilman Chairs.
To your point about making sure for the program itself, and just for clarification for my own, just on some other points. Mayor, are we still in a hiring freeze right now?
We're taking case-by-case basis.
Okay. What does that mean exactly? I'm new. Talk to me like I'm new to the council because I just want my part.
People that
Sorry.
have a tendency to generate revenue, positions tend to be filled as opposed to total expenditure of revenue.
Gotcha. Thank you.
Are there any other questions or comments? I know that Councilman Engert offered additional comments for us to consider. I think at a minimum, looking into the other recommendations is important. I don't know if we want to focus just on the SMH question or component, but are there any other recommendations outside of good cause eviction that we can action towards? Because truly to say that there was 120 days work for nothing, I think sends a very poor message to not only the residents, but also to the community that waited amid these conversations. Councilman DeToro?
Thank you. I do know that we were given, and quite some time ago, Chris Morris and Donna, I can't think of Donna's, I can't think of Gonzalez, okay, had worked together along with Chris Lund, the mayor's office, and a whole bunch of individuals to put together like a preferred properties program, which would be beneficial to, I believe, landlords and tenants. So tenants looking for properties that went through, that have a CO on them, to make sure that everything was up to standard, and then absolutely tenants being on a registry where landlords could see that in the past they've paid their rent, they take care of their property with proper. So those are all things that we can look at in watching the August 3rd meeting. Councilman chairs had a lot of good suggestions as well. So there's a lot of alternatives, I think. The good cause, I don't think good cause is a solution here, especially with housing instability. And the condition of a lot of the rental properties in our city. Our code, I think, has hired a couple more officers who are working out very well. So those are all things that, we can work with our code department with to make sure that these properties are properly inspected. And it's also up to the tenants themselves to make sure that the properties that they're moving into do have a CO. There's a lot of information and education that can go into this process. So I think it's a further discussion a long time around this table.
I think that raises a certain point. If they're expected for every property, why would a renter need to know whether it exists or not? So
I'm sorry?
If the expectation is for renters to be knowledgeable of whether a property has its certificate of residency, why would they need to know it if it's expected for every property? It should just be in place. Is that correct?
Right.
So I'd say that statement alone just identifies just the vagueness.
Right.
And that, can we confidently say that the program is functioning at 100%?
No.
No program is functioning at 100%. I'll save you the response.
Right.
So I think we need to intentionally look at it and also address if there are any system issues. How do we ensure that's moving forward? Councilman Chairs?
I one, appreciate Councilwoman DeToro's statement. That was before us, Ms. Gonzalez, prior that gave us that paperwork, or was that the year prior?
Just over the years, they've been working on it, but Donna is quite aware of it. Chris Morris is aware of it. I think this was handed out somewhere. Yeah.
Just in a perfect world, like Council President was saying, it would work, but having this
That's
as
also
another
in the
layer.
report also. It's in my report.
I remember just trying to figure out when we got the information for it, which is my apologies, because I don't remember getting it.
Yeah, it's in the report.
So I think in conclusion to tonight's conversation, I feel comfortable having this returned back for another iteration. And the reason why I'm asking is I hear some of the other council members saying their hesitancy with good cause eviction. Short of having a reasonable legislative item for us to focus on, there's nothing else for us to consider. And I think as I frequent having conversations with people in the community, I don't feel confident with what currently exists as a way to influence a different outcome. And it's important to identify that, again, good cause eviction is put in place to support good tenants and to support good landlords. And the fact that we have to continue to keep accurately identifying that is frustrating because I think it focuses the efforts more on what good cause isn't, as opposed to how it could potentially impact our community moving forward. But again, if we're going to say not good cause, then we need to reasonably say what the other alternative is and feel confident that that's going to improve the living conditions, not only for our renters, but also for our landlords. And if we don't have any other mechanism, that almost forces us to truly understand how we can implement good cause eviction and some of those conditions that outline what a small landlord is defined as, to ensure that this doesn't disproportionately impact our landlord community, but also that there are appropriate protections in place for our renters moving forward, because there aren't any. So I know that was a word salad, but I just asked for everyone to just truly come with some solid recommendations. And I am prepared next committee meeting, committee session, for us to take an action. So with that,
I just
Councilman
have
Patrick.
one more comment. A couple of folks that I spoke to before my medical incident included Mike Sakosha from City Mission, who obviously deals with a lot of housing issues, and Matthew Nelson, who's the Executive Director of Better Community Neighborhoods. And both of them had some really good insights too, but one of the comments that I recalled specifically from Mr. Sakosha was, looking not just at something like good cause eviction, but looking at like what are all the good things that are happening, like not just looking at the things that are the issues in housing, but what are the good practices that we do have in place in the city as housing exists. So I think that's another thing that if the task force comes back together, that might be something, on a more positive note, to try to make a list of those kinds of things as well, rather than just focusing on the negative aspects of things that, might be lacking in terms of housing. I thought that, obviously, he always has a really good positive outlook on topics as well. So I thought that was a really helpful comment. And I think Mr. Nelson also is a really good resource moving forward, because those are, Better Community Neighborhoods is probably our primary housing, overall housing for the city in terms of the work that they do with folks. So those are also two other organizations that I would throw into the mix of if you want to have another speaker, have speakers come here or whatever as we continue this discussion.
Thank you. If no other comments, bring this back for 2 weeks. The remaining 10 items are going to be held for executive session. Is that correct, Mr. O'Brien?
Yes.
So if there are no other discussions for city development planning, I ask for motion to recess.
So moved. Second.
All those in favor?
I'd like to call to order claims. We have one item on the agenda that needs to be discussed. I'd like to enter into executive session.
I make a motion to move to executive session.
I'll second it.
All in favor? Members of the public, already used, they know to leave.
I'm going to,
Yeah.
I mean, this is my